The manila folder wasn't heavy, just honest. It sat between us, creased in the corner, old coffee stain on the tab. I didn't touch it, neither did he. 3:40 on a Thursday, and the office smelled like toner and cheap aftershave. His. I'd made sure the receptionist left early. No one else knew who was waiting in my glass-walled conference room. I kept the lights dim and my voice calm, because this wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was a job interview. And the man sitting across from me, the one who used to call me a freeloader, soft, and most famously at a family barbecue, a waste of tuition, was now 48, recently laid off, and applying to be my logistics manager. He didn't know I was the owner yet, and I wasn't going to tell him, not today. A year ago, the idea of running a company would have been laughable. Back then, I was living in my aunt's converted attic in Joliet. No insulation, slanted ceilings, Wi-Fi that dropped if you shifted your chair. I was 30, unemployed, and fresh off getting ghosted by a startup I'd poured 6 months of unpaid dev work into. My dad, Brian Cartwright, made sure everyone in our extended family knew exactly what I'd become. He's got a good heart, but he just doesn't finish things, I overheard him say once on the phone. Didn't know I was in the hallway. Some people aren't cut out for pressure. I stopped hoping a long time ago. Stopped hoping. That was the line that stuck. It wasn't the worst thing he said, but it was the one that made my chest go cold. My dad's the kind of guy who plays the same 80s hit station in the garage on loop. Still calls the microwave the nuke box. Grew up working concrete, then moved into warehouse operations. For a while, he made good money at a freight logistics company out by Rockford. Big union job, benefits, pension, the works. Until last fall, when the company got bought out by some private equity group in Denver. Within 3 months, his entire division was outsourced, and he was let go with a 2-week severance and a supervisor who said, "It's not personal. You're just legacy infrastructure." That winter, he sent out over 100 resumes. No bites. Too old, too experienced, too expensive. Funny thing is, I had just closed my first government contract. While he was rewriting his resume, I was hiring my second delivery team. While he was asking my sister for help paying off the car note, I was signing a lease on a real office space with 2 conference rooms, a kitchenette, and one of those temperamental Nest thermostats that randomly set itself to Arctic tundra when no one's looking. And now, a year after he last called me a waste of tuition, he was sitting in my chair, hands folded, resume printed on the same inkjet I remember fixing for him in 10th grade. So, he cleared his throat. Is Mr. Carter running late? That made my jaw tick. Not smile. Tick. Carter Logistics Solutions. That's what I named it. Carter's my mom's maiden name. I didn't want anything associated with Cartwright on the paperwork. Mr. Carter's reviewing your application, I said, nodding to the folder. He prefers to observe candidates informally first, get a feel for how they interact. He nodded, like that made sense. It probably did to someone who still believed in chain of command and corner offices. I watched him adjust his sleeves. Same watch he wore when he picked me up from soccer in '99, yelling at me for sitting out the second half. Winners don't rest when they're tired, they rest when the job's done. Classic Brian line. I wondered if he remembered saying it. I wondered if it had ever actually helped him. When I was younger, I used to think my dad's voice was steel, unbreakable, loud enough to make anything real. I remember hiding a bad report card once, and he found it wedged under my mattress. Didn't yell, just stood there, reading the comments. Lax follow-through, inattentive during group tasks. Do you like disappointing people? He asked. Calm, like a doctor about to tell you your leg had to come off. Years later, I got accepted to a decent state school with a partial ride. First in the family. Thought maybe that would make him look at me different. It didn't. He pulled me aside before I left and said, "Don't flake. Don't crawl back home in 6 months with some excuse." I lasted 5 semesters before dropping out. Not because I couldn't do it, but because I couldn't keep justifying it to myself. I didn't know what I was building toward. The debt, the lectures, the identity crisis every time a professor asked us to define value creation. When I dropped out, my mom cried. My dad just got real quiet, like someone had proved him right. The thing about being underestimated your whole life is that eventually you stop trying to prove people wrong. You just disappear from their radar, and that's where I built everything. My first warehouse contract came from a fluke Craigslist post. Some indie distributor needed short-term help moving overflow inventory. I rented a box truck, filed an LLC that afternoon, and called 2 friends from college who were between jobs. I barely slept that month, but we finished early, and they paid in full. Then came referrals, small ones at first, pop-up events, local breweries, a niche bookstore that needed to transport rare comics without damage. I figured out how to rig foam stabilization with repurposed fridge insulation panels. Cheap, effective, looked professional. Clients remembered. By the time we landed our first state contract, handling transport logistics for a regional emergency supply chain, I had a crew of 10 and enough saved to lease a proper space. The receptionist I hired, her name's Mel. She thinks I'm mid-30s with an MBA. I let the myth build. I don't correct people anymore. It's cleaner that way. Back in the conference room, my dad was squinting at the company values poster on the wall. One of those cheap motivational designs I bought on impulse. White letters over a photo of stacked shipping crates. Accountability, speed, quiet confidence, he read out loud. That last one's interesting. It's a Carter thing, I said. He chuckled. Well, whoever wrote That's got style. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer for sure, but smaller too. Like someone had let air out of him while he wasn't looking. You've got 30 years experience, I said, flipping open the folder. Why here? He didn't answer right away. Then, because I'm tired of pretending I know what comes next. That caught me off guard. He wasn't being clever. He wasn't rehearsing. He looked beat. And something in me softened, but I didn't show it. I offered him the job. Not that day, not on the spot. I told him Carter would review the interview tapes. 3 days later, Mel called him, told him he was hired. Logistics floor manager, entry-level pay, but with room to grow. I watched from the back stairwell as he walked in his first day, button down tucked too tight, thermos in hand, head high. He didn't recognize me when I passed him in the hallway. Didn't see the owner tag on my lanyard. Didn't know that the Mr. Carter in the email chain was the same kid who used to beg him not to shout during parent-teacher conferences. And I didn't tell him. Not yet. The second week he was on the job, Mel knocked gently on my office door, with her eyebrows doing that thing they do when something's weird, but not technically HR reportable. Your new floor manager just offered to mop the break room. I blinked. Is it dirty? It's fine. He said the streaks were bugging him. I looked past her through the glass wall. There he was, my dad, sleeves rolled up, crouched down by the vending machine, a roll of paper towels tucked under one arm like a football. Let him, I said, as long as he doesn't try to paint the walls. He fit in faster than I expected. Quiet worker, never late. Kept a logbook like it was 92 and barcode scanners hadn't been invented. I watched him from the security feed sometimes, not to spy, but just to, I don't know, recalibrate who he was now. He joked with the drivers, called Ramon college boy, even though Ramon dropped out too, told Jenna the right kind of earplugs to use when backing a truck into a tight dock. Shared half his sandwich with Luis on the day the vending machine broke. He moved through the building like he was trying to earn something invisible, and that made it harder. Watching him earn respect from everyone but me. I hadn't told anyone who he was. Not Mel. Not the crew. If they noticed, we had the same crooked pinky finger. Bike crash at 8 for me. High. School shop class for him. They didn't say anything. If he recognized the Carter signature on the quarterly bonus memos as my handwriting, he never brought it up. And me? I was becoming fluent in the art of avoidance. Made sure our one-on-ones were scheduled after hours. Took meetings from home on the days he was coordinating field logistics. Told myself it was cleaner that way. But I was lying to both of us. 3 months in, the state contract expanded. We picked up 2 new counties for emergency resource transport, and that meant more drivers, tighter schedules, and way more risk of compliance headaches. I needed someone to oversee field dispatch. Someone who could think on their feet but didn't panic when a shipment went sideways. I also needed to be able to trust them, so I called him in. He stood just inside the doorway, baseball cap in hand, like a kid waiting for the principal to say, "Close the door behind you." "Sit," I said. "It's not bad." He sat. I slid a map across the table. Routes, schedules, bottlenecks. "You're already managing 60% of these. Might as well make it official." He nodded, slow. "You trust me?" I shrugged. "You're consistent. You keep your word. You care about outcomes. It's rare." He nodded again, but his jaw tightened. Then he asked, "How come I've never met Mr. Carter?" That pause in the room, long and sharp, was the kind that pulled a layer off your ribs. "He's not around much," I said. "Delegates, watches from a distance." "Like a ghost," he muttered. "What?" "Nothing." But I knew what he meant. And he wasn't wrong. Later that week, I found him outside on the loading dock, sitting on an overturned crate, nursing a coffee. It was nearly 7. Everyone else had gone home. I should have walked past, should have pretended I had calls to make or spreadsheets to review. But I sat, didn't say anything for a full minute. He broke the silence first. "You know, this place reminds me of my first warehouse job, down in Cicero. No heat in winter, no AC in summer. But the guys looked out for each other. Union boys. Real grit." I nodded. "Is that where you learned dispatch?" He snorted. "No. I learned dispatch because nobody else wanted to deal with the guy on the night shift who kept screwing up pallets. They figured, let Brian handle it. He's stubborn enough to fix it or quit trying." "You fix it?" "Nope. I fired him." I laughed, despite myself. He chuckled too. Then the silence came back, different this time. "You ever feel like people only see what you used to be?" he asked. "Like no matter what you do, they've already made their mind up?" It hit harder than it should have. I didn't answer. Because if I did, I'd have to admit I still saw him the way he saw me a year ago. That weekend, I went back to my aunt's place. She still rented out the attic, now to a college kid with a guitar and a permanent weed smell. I stood in the backyard where the grass always grew patchy, where my dad once told me to stop mowing in zigzags because it made us look like people without standards. I used to hate this house. The wallpaper in the kitchen, the half-finished deck, the way the screen door slammed like an insult. But now it felt small, like a place that only had power if I stayed in it too long. The truth was, I didn't know how to forgive him. Not because he'd ruined my life, but because he didn't remember that he tried. The words he threw around so easily, disappointment, embarrassment, you'll never finish, they were nails he drove into me for years. And now, he wanted a clean slate just because he wore a slightly nicer shirt and knew how to organize a shipment schedule. It didn't seem fair, but wasn't that the whole reason I brought him on? Because I wanted to be more fair than he'd ever been? Wasn't that the point? The breaking point came during inventory week. It's always a mess. Units mislabeled, drivers skipping log entries, software bugs. Stress turns normal people into monsters. Mel called me just before lunch. Your floor manager just told a driver to shut up and do his damn job. I stood up too fast. My chair slammed into the wall. By the time I got to the warehouse floor, he was standing stiff, arms crossed, face red. Luis, one of our best guys, looked like he'd just been chewed out in front of the whole team, because he had. Brian, I said sharply. He turned, froze. I motioned to the corner. Now. He followed me into the inventory cage. Quiet, metal shelving on all sides, half-empty boxes smelling like tape and stress sweat. What happened? I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Then, I lost my temper. No kidding, he nodded. Luis logged 2 pallets without checking the seal codes. Could have been a whole shipment error. So explain that. Don't bark like you're back in a 1990s union yard. His jaw twitched. I don't know any other way, he said. You could learn. He looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw it happen. His eyes changed. Something clicked. You're him, he said softly. I didn't flinch. You're Carter. I didn't answer. He stepped back like he needed to recalibrate the room. All this time? I nodded once. He didn't yell, didn't swear, just leaned back against the metal rack and let out a low breath that sounded more like shame than anger. Then he said the first real thing I'd heard from him in years. Guess I was wrong about you. For 3 days after he found out I was Mr. Carter, my dad didn't say more than 20 words to me. He still showed up early, still walked the floor, checked the logs, filled in for a no-show driver on Wednesday. But something in his posture had changed. He moved like a man walking through smoke, bumping into furniture he used to know the shape of. He didn't meet my eyes when we crossed paths, just nodded, once, and kept moving. I didn't stop him, not yet. I told myself it was better this way, that the silence meant he was processing it all. The job, the discovery, the fact that I'd built something without him and then let him incite it without gloating, without vengeance, without so much as an "I told you so." But part of me wanted him to say something, anything, not because I needed the credit, because I needed him to understand that I'd spent years believing I was exactly what he said I was, soft, scattered, incapable. And when I finally stopped believing it, it wasn't because he saw potential in me. It was because he gave up. And I got tired of proving him right. Mel brought it up first. I think your dad's avoiding the second floor. We were going over quarterly bonuses in the upstairs conference room. Her tone was neutral, but the way she said your dad told me she'd figured it out weeks ago. How long have you known? She shrugged. The pinky thing. And he looks at you like a guy who once grounded him through Christmas. I smiled. Barely. That would have been my 12th birthday. She looked at me for a second, then said, Do you want me to move him to the other site? Put some space between you? I shook my head. No. If he wants to leave, he can. I'm not sending him away. She didn't press it, just circled something on the spreadsheet and said, He's good with the team. Even the drivers listen to him now. That last part landed harder than it should have. Even the drivers. The next time I saw him alone, he was restocking a supply rack. Labels, zip ties, spare tablets. The kind of grunt work no one asked him to do anymore. I stood there for a second, just watching. He noticed me, finally. Need something? He asked. His voice was level, not warm, not cold. No, just checking supplies. He nodded but didn't step aside. I stayed there anyway. He sealed a box shut, ran his hand along the tape like it needed smoothing. Then, You started this whole thing from that Craigslist job? I didn't answer right away, just leaned against the doorframe. Yeah, I said. I guess I wanted to see if I could build something without being told I wasn't good enough. He flinched. Not hard, but enough. Fair, he said. We stood there in silence. Long enough for the lights to dim slightly. The motion sensors thought we'd left. Then he cleared his throat. You remember when you were 12 and I took away your bike? Yeah, I said without hesitation. You said the chain broke because I didn't respect my things. He nodded slowly. It didn't. I broke it. Ran over it backing out of the garage. Never told you. My mouth went dry. Why? Because I was mad you left it lying there. And I was even madder that I didn't check before I backed up. I blamed you because it was easier than saying I messed up. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. He looked up then, eyes tired, honest. I've been blaming people my whole life. My dad, my bosses, you. It's easy when you think you're owed something for surviving. Harder when you start realizing no one owes you jack. I swallowed. He stepped back. Let me pass. But before I left the room, he said, You did good, kid. I mean that. He started taking the stairs after that. Started sitting in meetings again, making eye contact. He didn't try to apologize more than once. But I noticed the shifts. How he let junior staff talk longer. How he made room for mistakes without slamming the table. He even laughed at his own missteps. I didn't forgive him in one day. But I started to believe maybe he was trying. And that mattered more than I expected. 2 weeks later, we got hit with a compliance audit. State inspectors, surprise check. Some forms out of order, some inventory logs mismatched. Nothing illegal, but enough to trigger penalties if not handled right. I walked into the war room at 6 a.m. and found him already there, sleeves up, sorting through shipment manifests from 6 months back. He handed me a stack without looking up. Cross-checked these against the October batch. I flagged inconsistencies with a red tab. I stared at the pile. "You've been here all night?" He grunted. "Just since 4. That's when I realized Luis was right about the misdated pallets. My bad. Fixing it now. I sat down without a word. We worked side by side for 4 hours. Didn't fight, didn't rehash history, just solved a problem like two men with the same goal. And for the first time, I understood something I'd never let myself consider before. He wasn't proud because I'd proved him wrong. He was proud because I stopped needing him to be right. The audit passed. Minor write-up. No fine, no press. Mel brought in donuts. Luis cracked a beer on the loading dock and got away with it. And my dad? He took his thermos, patted Mel on the shoulder and said, "You ever think about taking over dispatch someday? You've got the brain for it." She lit up like he'd handed her a trophy. I watched from the mezzanine, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a lost cause in the room where he was. That night, he knocked on my office door before leaving. "Got a sec?" I looked up. "Yeah." He came in, holding a folder, thicker than usual. Not the one from his interview, but the same color. Set it down. Sat. "What's this?" He took a breath. "My resignation." I blinked. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because I think it's time. You don't need me here. And I don't want you thinking I stayed because I couldn't do anything else." I didn't answer. He stood to go, then paused. I said what I said back then because I was scared. Not of you, of how much of me I saw in you. His voice was low, steady. You had dreams I didn't understand. And when you stumbled, I assumed that meant you'd never walk right. That was my failure, not yours. Then he smiled, real soft. But you didn't stay down, and that's not something a lost cause does. He left before I could respond. Didn't wait for me to accept the resignation. Didn't need to. He didn't come back the next day. Didn't show up the day after that either. Mel handed me his ID badge in a quiet envelope. like it was something that needed blessing. Inside, it was his key card, a small, sticky note that just said, "Thanks for the second shot," and a folded receipt from the truck stop diner down the road. Coffee and 2 eggs, paid in cash. He hadn't even told Luis he was leaving. Just said to tell the next guy not to screw up the zip ties, Luis said, still rubbing his neck. Thought he was joking. I nodded. He wasn't. I kept expecting to feel something. Relief. Regret. Maybe a release from whatever emotional knot I'd been holding onto all year. But mostly the office just felt quieter. Not empty. He was never the loudest guy, but less anchored somehow, like the building lost one of its heavier shadows. Mel noticed it too. "You gonna replace him?" I shook my head. "Not yet." She glanced at the roster pinned behind me. "Floor's stretched. We'll feel it next week." I knew she was right, but there was something unfinished in me that hiring another logistics lead wasn't going to fix, so I didn't. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my mom. She was the only one who still called my work line instead of my cell. "You talked to your father?" "No," I said, logging into the fleet portal. "Why?" She hesitated. "Then, he's been reorganizing the garage." "Okay?" "Like, alphabetically." That made me pause. "Has he ever done that?" "Not even close. I found a label maker on the lawn." I almost laughed. Almost. "Has he said anything? About quitting?" "Not much. Just that he wanted to leave on a high note, and that he was proud of you." The words caught somewhere under my ribs. "He said that?" "Yeah, like 3 times. You know your father. If he repeats it, it means it's true." I didn't answer. She softened. "He talks about the warehouse, like it was more than a job." That night, I drove out to the old neighborhood, pulled up past the fence that still had the warped slat he refused to fix on principle. His truck was in the driveway, light on in the garage. I sat there with the engine running. I didn't know what I was planning to say, but eventually I got out. He was standing by the workbench, holding a socket wrench like it owed him money. "Looks good," I said. He didn't turn. He trying to find the leak in the compressor. "Won't hold pressure." I nodded, stepping inside. The garage smelled the same. Old oil, wood dust, a hint of lemon cleaner. "Noticed you've got the drill bits labeled now. Color-coded too." He finally looked at me. "What brings you here?" "I got your badge," he nodded. "Meant to leave it cleaner. Got distracted." We stood there, awkward and too adult for our own history. Then I said it. "You were right about something." He raised an eyebrow. "I needed to figure it out without you." He didn't reply, so I kept going. "But you were wrong about the rest. I didn't quit because I was soft. I quit because I was tired of being ashamed in front of you." He flinched, then looked down at the wrench. "I know." That surprised me. "I don't need an apology," I said. "I'm not here for that." "Good," he said, "because I'm not good at sorry, but I am working on it." That made me smile. Not big, but real. We stood there for a minute. Then he asked, "So what now?" I shrugged. "You ever think about consulting?" He laughed. "You offering?" "Maybe." He leaned back against the bench. "Well, the last guy I worked for was a real hard ass. Never smiled. That guy built something decent." He looked at me, and this time, he really saw me. Not a failure, not a mirror, just me. We didn't hug. That wasn't us. But when I left, he walked me to the truck, asked about the audit, offered advice about a vendor dispute we were having, all offhand, like muscle memory. I let him, because sometimes reconciliation isn't a moment. It's a pattern, a dozen small chances to let each other show up again without punishment. Over the next month, he started coming in once a week, unofficially. Didn't want to be on payroll. Said he was Just visiting, but the drivers started saving him a chair. Mel pretended not to notice when he used the company printer to mock up route templates. Luis brought him coffee from the diner. And me? I stopped checking the security feed when he was in. Didn't need to. We were sitting in the break room one Friday afternoon when he said it. I don't expect a second chance to fix everything. I looked up. But I'd like to earn your trust moving forward. I nodded. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about effort, about the day in, day out work of being better than you were. And I could live with that. The day I officially put him back on payroll, I didn't tell him. I just gave Mel the go-ahead and added his hours retroactively for the month. She slipped the stub into a plain envelope with a sticky note that read, "Welcome back. No badge required." He didn't say anything when he found it in his drawer the following Tuesday. But he did start showing up 5 minutes earlier than usual. And for the first time since he stepped into my building, he started calling me by my name in front of the crew. Not boss, not sir, just Eli. We never had a big talk about it. No big father-son summit, no emotion-drenched, "I've changed" speech, just a slow shift in gravity. One day, he stopped calling Mel Missy and started calling her Operations. One day, I caught him giving Luis his personal wrench kit, because you can't torque a damn thing with those cheap rubber grips. One day, I walked past the dry erase board in the dispatch room and saw his handwriting next to mine, outlining new truck routes with improved fuel efficiency. He'd stopped working for the company. He'd started working with it. The team felt it too. Weirdly enough, it was Ramon who said it first. "Your dad's kind of the soul of the place now, huh?" I raised an eyebrow. "What makes you say that?" He sipped his soda. "I don't know. Just feels like if he believes in something, we all try harder." That stuck with me. Because for a long time, I was terrified he'd walk through my doors and ruin the thing I built. Instead, he gave it roots. One night, I was working late. Quarterlies as usual. The building was empty except for me, a flickering hallway light, and the hum of the HVAC. He poked his head in the door with 2 takeout bags. "I didn't know what you liked," he said, "so I got both." We sat on opposite sides of my desk. Chicken korma for me, something aggressively spicy for him. Midway through, he said, "You remember that comic book shop you used to beg me to take you to?" I nodded. "Yeah, Midtown Comics. Tuesday new releases. You know why I stopped taking you?" I chewed slower. "Because you said it was a waste of gas." He shook his head. "No, I was embarrassed. I didn't get it. Watching you light up over some guy in tights made me feel like I'd failed as a dad." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "Turns out, I failed by not just letting you be who you were." I put my fork down. He wasn't looking at me when he said it, but his voice didn't shake. "I was scared that if I didn't make you hard, the world would break you." He finally met my eyes. "But you didn't break. You adapted. And I'm the one still learning how." After that night, things just steadied. He worked 3 days a week, consulted on big loads, mentored 2 new hires without being asked. He even gave Mel tips on negotiating freight contracts. You go 3 rounds, then let them name the price. Watch how quick they drop. She picked it up fast. We got our first cross-state contract that spring. A year after he first walked in for that interview, I stood in front of the whole team with a plaque for outstanding operational impact. It was supposed to go to a department. I gave it to him. He held it like it was heavier than it looked. Didn't smile big, just nodded once. Afterward, he slipped the plaque into the backseat of his truck like he wasn't sure where to hang it. One Sunday, my mom invited me over for dinner. No special occasion. Just lasagna and a table that smelled like basil and dusted Parmesan. He was already seated when I arrived. Had a beer in front of him, untouched. As I sat down, he slid a small box across the table. Inside, a watch. The same model I remembered him wearing when I was a kid. Silver, simple, scratched on the face. Except this one was new, engraved. E. Carter, forged, not found. He didn't say anything. Didn't have to. I closed the box gently, then reached for my glass. Dinner tasted warmer after that. There are still days I wonder how different things would have been if he'd believed in me sooner. If he'd shown up at graduation, if he'd read my first business plan instead of tossing it aside with a grunt. But I've learned something over the past year. Maybe the only lesson worth holding on to. Sometimes, the second shot isn't just about giving them another chance. It's about giving yourself the permission to stop carrying their failure like it's yours. My dad called me a lost cause. Now he calls me his boss. But the truth is, titles don't matter much anymore. He's still my father. I'm still his son. And we're both still learning how to do that better. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.